What is up, people? It's Dave, Duncan Kyle, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan Kyle and I have been checking out the new album from Belgian alternative act Steak. The band's new album, Love, Death and Decay, will be released on September 30th via Hassel Records. So, gentlemen, Steak, formerly Steak number 8, for those of you that remember that era of the band. This will be the band's 6th full-length album, which follows up 2019's Critical Method. Steak's latest release sees the band acknowledging their everyday fears and anxieties in a bid to better understand how to tackle them. Speaking on their latest offering, vocalist, guitarist, this is where I fuck up everybody's name.
I can't wait.
Van Este. Fear dominates us so often that it can seemingly take control of our decisions without realising it. I already missed many opportunities because of fear. This is the moment I want to draw a line under that. Fuck my anxieties, exclaims Van Este. We released this as a kind of mantra when you need a little extra strength to acknowledge that fear is winning. If we can grasp our personal fears in their entirety, I think it allows us to rid ourselves of them fully. Don't get caught up in your fear, turn it around. Am I actually scared? Which anxieties do I have? You try to understand, then you grasp them, and then you can get further in life. Eventually you have to say, fuck my anxiety. Never broken by the weight of grief or existential dread, however, he uses those feelings as fuel for a musical fire that's as boldly unconventional as it is bracingly alive. This band is about all my inner darkness and demons, and finding a peaceful place in my head he grapples. Preferring his songs to do the talking, I'm not going to be able to erase them, but making music is a great way of arranging them and surviving this crazy life. That process began when he was 13 years old, forming Steak number 8. I did not know that. In honour of his recently deceased brother.
They did look really young. Like,
Yeah,
remember,
they did.
I'm sure we commented way back in the day when I think it was their second album came in, or maybe it was their debut from the Rock and Roll Reviews era when we did that 2013. I want to say, and I remember the press release. I remember the picture and just thinking, like, I mean, are they photoshopping themselves, or is that like a fucking Instagram filter or something? Because they looked like 12.
Yeah.
So apparently they were a little bit older, but not that much older.
Forming Steak number 8 in honour of his recently deceased brother Tobias, Brent channeled the most aching personal tragedy into their first 4 albums, making the whole European rock scene sit up and take notice. The band's 2018 rebrand, accompanying 5th album Critical Method, included this mourning process by moving away from that unwieldy original name, and the last few years have proven that you can never really leave these things behind. The band's latest offering, Love, Death and Decay, is testament to that. Guitarist Sis Demon is, by his own admission, far more cold of a cold realist than his frontman. The one-time funeral director is a dark foil to Brent's flightier tendencies, and the contrast between their mindsets is key to the shape-shifting mood and captivating desolation of Steak's brilliant new album. Where Brent is more fixated on love and death, Sis explains frankly his fascination lies in death and decay. Returning to record their local Foxy Lane studio in Ghent and Brent's home space Stimular, those thoughts and feelings were distilled into 8 remarkable, entirely self-produced songs. So, a lot of info there, but I thought it was relevant. As we said, we've been following these guys for quite a while, way back in the Rock and Roll Reviews days. I'm pretty sure one of us reviewed like The Hutch and possibly Cosmocoma as well, actually.
I did The Hutch. Like, that's how they got on my radar, and I fucking loved that album. So
and I enjoyed the last one, Critical Method. So excitement was quite high when I saw this one coming in. I was like, oh, this looks like an album that should be reviewed by us. I hadn't really listened to the singles either, and it was a kind of conscious thing. I feel like Steak are more of a kind of context band. Like, I don't know if you get the full picture from a Steak single, if you know what I mean. I think it's not until you hear it all together with all the moving parts that it all kind of makes sense. But once I'd heard the album and listened to the actual singles, they actually do work as individual tracks. I think it was Fuck My Anxiety was the one that felt kind of most experimental of the 3, but when you hear it on the album, it's actually not the most experimental track. I think one of my kind of favourite things about this release is how varied it is. Like this feels wider in terms of like contrast for Stake. They've always had like that kind of light and shade, and you know, like the clean work blended in with the heavy stuff. But this feels like they've pushed those limits a little bit further. Even in the guitar tone, like the guitar tone was really interesting on this one. A little bit less abrasive than usual. Although it still has like an almost kind of metallic coating, but it feels like they've removed some of the harshness or the kind of coarseness of it, and they've mixed in almost like a kind of clean tone into it as well. But it doesn't water anything down. Like this still feels heavy. It still has impact. But what I think it does is it makes those kind of ambient and more atmospheric parts more kind of like blended almost. And you get that on the first track, on the title track, when the track kind of transitions from this like quite kind of angular, hardcore laced kind of sludge riff into something more atmospheric, almost psychedelic. It's like soaked in reverb and laced with all this kind of like ambient kind of lead work, and some really like tasteful, clean melodies. Which when I heard that first track, I was like, the first thing I thought was, this is going to be sounding amazing live. I could picture it live already after just hearing that first track. It will definitely, that's going to sound epic. And it bleeds like perfectly. The flow of that just goes right into Deliverance Dance, which is one of the singles they released. And the transition is just like seamless. It just flows brilliantly into that track. That track though, like vocally, I never noticed it before, but there was a little bit of a like He Is Legend thing coming through on that track. I thought his vocal has got a similar kind of character to Skylar from He Is Legend.
I think it's just because he's getting older. This all now makes sense. This all makes sense. His voice was in a higher cadence on the Hutch, and I think it's just because he's getting older that his voice is getting huskier. So.
That track again, very different. It kind of starts off more kind of like with this kind of like post-rock alternative style. Kind of, I was like picturing almost like similar to a band like Thrice. But then it kind of builds in intensity and speed, and in the last riff, which is heavy as fuck, just it lasts for a bar, and it kind of like just leaves you on the edge of your seat, like what? Like you were expecting it to just kind of explode and carry on, but it doesn't. And then it takes you then into Zone Out, which is like punkier again. It's like it's weird. Like I know they're from Belgium, but it's a very like almost kind of Scandinavian kind of feel to it. That track, a wee bit kind of like Kvelertak or something in the guitars. But it's still blended with that Stake kind of weight and kind of atmosphere as well. Then around the kind of middle of the album, you have some of the heavies, like the heaviest riffs of the release. I mentioned Fuck My Anxiety earlier, but it has a fucking awesome kind of groove riff on the album, one of the best on the album. And then again, that guitar tone, it doesn't feel overly distorted, but somehow it still feels really fucking heavy. You've got some kind of almost like Dillinger vibes on Queen in the Dirt. Which is, it's not as like mathy like rhythmically, but the chord choices were quite similar to something Dillinger would do. And then again, they take on that kind of more kind of high-paced, full-on attack on Deadlock Eyes, which switches up the tempo and the feel again. But again, it finishes off with a monster of a riff, so you always feel quite satisfied by a Stake track. But I feel like they just continually hit you with different ideas. They kept it varied and interesting. Doesn't feel like a repetitive album at all. There's always something kind of going on in the background, so it's one of those albums that does take you a few listens to fully kind of like digest it as well. The last two tracks kind of bring you down gently almost, like both like full of texture and leaning more into that kind of ambient territory. No like big riffs on those tracks, but I kind of like that. It kind of gave the album a feeling of coming to an end, which with the last track, Dream City, sounds exactly as it sounds, like very serene, quite dreamlike. And though it does kind of build towards the end, they keep it fairly restrained musically, let the vocals kind of almost carry the emotion of the track. And I thought it was a really cool ending. I think this is one of those albums that, for me, it kind of got better every time I heard it. I don't think it's a perfect album, but I think it's an album that gives you all these different sides to the band without sounding like Stake are throwing everything at the wall and hoping, just some of it sticks. I think they managed to be quite experimental, but it doesn't sound detrimental to the kind of core sound. And I think this album for me sounds like they've delivered something that sounds like they are kind of moving forward musically. That they've expanded on what they had before and tweaked a few things. I think like this band, even though it's like 6 albums in, they're still fairly kind of unknown in a lot of kind of like metal circles, which is just fucking mad. So I really hope that this album puts more eyes on them, because it's a really fucking good album from this band. Thoroughly impressed with this one. Really enjoyed it. What about you guys? How did you get on, Duncan? What do you think of this?
I adore this.
Oh, really?
I think this is their best album.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, we've been following them from back in the Hutch days, and I have they won me over on that album. I loved that massive kind of weighty, sludgy, groovy thing they did with like kind of almost elements of kind of there was a bleaking coldness of like a post metal in there as well in the early days.
Yeah.
And that's kind of gone now, and they've kind of shelved a lot of that as we moved on. But I think like album on album, they've always maintained a really interesting approach to their musical growth, and I think what that has meant on certain albums is I think the mix is done well of experimentation and kind of just brutality. Sometimes it's went the other way on some releases. The previous album I thought was really good, but I don't love it like I thought I was gonna, and I can't really put my finger on what it was that didn't connect with me to the extent that this ticks every single box for me. It's worth saying, you mentioned Dave helmed the production duties. The production is fucking immaculate.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely brilliant. I loved it. Everything just like really, 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 really well balanced. The nuance of the quieter sections or the cleaner parts don't feel lost when the heavier bits come in. The flow into that is just sublime. I think vocally it's mixed incredibly well, because once again he's got a different dynamic range in vocals that would make it quite difficult to capture in that way. He's got like a really aggressive kind of lower tone. He's got a great mid-range tone. Even on the track "Fuck My Anxiety," there are elements there where he's almost kind of, he's not quite as visceral, but it's kind of snarly, grungy vocals, which wouldn't be amiss with Mantar this year. It's like it's in that same sort of register and cadence, and it just really fucking works. And then you get the cleans, and the cleans have this kind of raspy, smoky feel as well that just are like absolutely delicious to listen to. Just like really, really, really like just full on gorgeous. But to me, the element that really kind of struck me back was, and you kind of mentioned it, is the use of the guitars on this album are so varied and so interesting, and the dexterity that they take you in their songwriting and in the album composition, I think is just as like this to me feels like thought and craft. Like you read a lengthy kind of biog of the band and their modus operandi coming into this release. But I hear it on this. I hear time, care, and consideration. Like songs, it's easy to bleed one song into another, but is the payoff worth it? It totally is here. Like when you go from Love, Death, and Decay into Deliverance Dance, it just works. It just like it seamlessly works, and it seems satisfying, and it takes you on the next step of your kind of your listening journey, for lack of a better word. But it takes you through that. But it's the variety beyond that. Zone Out does have this kind of almost jangly sort of thing going on, which I wasn't expecting, but it's there and it works. They're not scared to put in like small elements of a band that I've been mentioning loads this year. There's kind of almost early Will Haven elements of kind of punk and some of those weird melodic chords they used to do that always sounded like, oh, that's melody, but why am I so uncomfortable with it? That's in there as well. They really hold back on those massive heavy riffs, but like if you're complaining about that, they have albums and albums and albums of those riffs, which actually made me appreciate their songwriting even more here, that they can't just drop it in the last 2 bars of a song or only give you a middle section and then move away from it. And you are wanting more, but I'm like, but listen to all the other stuff. It's not that, once again, it's not detrimental to anything they're doing here. And I love the back half of this album, from Queen in the Dirt right through Deadlock Eyes, which is another banging single. It's really fucking good. Into Ray of the Sun, which starts to bring things down. And then Dream City is a fucking immaculate closer. I absolutely adore that track. So yeah, I was kind of sitting here going, did I just find my new favourite Steak album? I think I did. I think this is them. It's not even achieving what they promised, because if I was to go back, and I did today, went back and listened to the very first album I heard from them, The Hutch, and put them side by side, the band are almost unrecognisable now in terms of that sound. But when I was listening, I'd been listening to a lot of Love, Death and Decay. I was thinking about, could those songs fit into a set? Absolutely. Like, absolutely. They've not moved so far off that it's like completely like it's a different band now. It's still there, but to me, I'm sick of hearing bands talk about their musical growth and how they experiment, and I listen to it and it sounds like the previous album or the previous 5, right? There's been no change. And I also hate bands that are like, I hate how corner like that, this album's going to be like the debut. It was 25 fucking years ago, right? You're all millionaires. I don't want to hear about how your father diddled you, right? I don't want to hear that. Don't want to hear that. Let's sing a song about how the IRS is trying to take all your cash. You're like, do something like that. I just don't understand it. I understand that people pine for albums that were written 15, 10, 20 years ago, whatever it is. But bands aren't that band anymore. Just give me good music and I'm a happy guy. And Love, Death and Decay is a fucking stellar album in the music department, and one that if I was them, I'd be immensely proud of. Very much like yourself, Dave. It blows my mind that we are, a decade into their career, and they're still relatively unknown. The name change probably didn't help that, but yeah, like they are, like, now more than ever, this band needs on your radar. I'd said a bold statement earlier on in the year where I said that I'd be surprised if anyone could give me that kind of sludgy, rocky sort of album to the caliber of Cave-In, and I think Steak have right now. That's how good I think this album is. I think I would put on par with Cave-In's new release, maybe even edging it out. I think they've got elements that make them a bit more interesting overall, and do it in half the time in that album. It's a 45-minute album, you know what I mean? So yeah, this is fucking awesome. Loved it.
Nice. Kyle, what do you think?
I love that it's completely self-produced. It sounds immense. Just, it's so well done. It's not like overproduced, and it's not like you've heard other bands that have self-produced and it sounds like absolute shit, like it was recorded with a carpet rug, you know? But no, I really like that. They've clearly taken the care and attention.
It's risky though, isn't it? Like, a self-produced album can be very risky.
It can be,
especially if you've not got that person, you know, guiding you, you know, and that doesn't really work. You know, I mean, you're overthinking it because it's your own stuff as well.
And yet, Guppy have done it this year, and these guys, and both of them nailed it. I'm not saying that producers out there should be worried, Kyle,
no,
but you'll always need a producer. That's what we're saying on this show.
Like that,
I mean, they probably showed it to some people they knew and musicians they knew, and they had feedback that way. But I mean, for a self-produced album, it sounds damn near perfect. There's like nothing. I was like, what the fuck is that at all? Nothing at all. It was absolutely just, wow, you did this yourself? How did you have the objectivity for such a long period of time to get these songs out on an album and produce it yourself? I mean, I've been there and I listened to it and I'm like, the fuck was I thinking? I'm sure maybe they're probably thinking about something. There's always something we're never going to hear that they will, but from this side of the desk, it's absolutely incredible that they did all this themselves. So and I think the bass player might be a fan of Primus. There's definitely a few little Primus things in there every now and then. I love that. I mean, I'm just going to rehash what you two guys have said. It's I came in the same time as you guys did with the Hutch, and it's a markedly different band now. I haven't heard anything they've done in between because, like you say, they are criminally underrated and underreported on. But I do love how this album is super varied but still coherent. It's really difficult to do, I think. Anybody can write a bunch of different sounding songs, but to have them all sound like the same band over such a... I mean, it's not a long album, but it's 8 tracks. And especially with the come down at the end, it's very, very varied all the way through, and you get really heavy moments, get very pretty clean parts and everything, and it's really impressed with how they managed to keep it together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, everything you guys said, and yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Yeah,
it's kind of like at times it reminded me a little bit, not musically in any way, shape, or form, but when we were reviewing that previous Boss Colloid album, and we were like, it's just like the next track comes on, you're like where are we going? Like, I love it, but like how we ended up here, and that's kind of where I was on this one. I just kind of felt like every time a song finished, and I was like, right, the next track would come in, and it would be completely not what I expected the song to start with, but it still had all those elements that very much made it of this album. I just think that's very, very, very clever to do and make it work.
In the middle of songs, like the last quarter or third of Queen of the Dirt is fucking heavy as fuck, and the first rest of it wasn't that heavy, and it's like, how the hell, where, what, how?
Yeah, I agree that I think a lot of the kind of alternative moments in the album were the parts that really caught me off guard.
Yeah,
because you're almost expecting the heaviness from them and the kind of sludginess and stuff like that, but those moments where they go clean and like more alternative are a bit like, oh, that's different, but they've slotted it in so well. It just sounds like it was always part of their sound. It's really cool.
It can play as well, like that guitarist can really, because once again you switch a pedal off and you can sound clean, you know what I mean? But to be able to capture that style and that sound, specifically that kind of Thrice element. There are so many bands that want, like Thrice at one point were like one of the most copied bands on the planet. Like every band that came out in that kind of post-hardcore thing, I wanted to sound like Thrice, but very few nailed it. And there's just a small element where it's like a nod to, without trying, and it doesn't last that long either. And they don't really revisit it, nor do they. It's fucking great.
Yeah.
Makes it more impactful that they don't overuse it. I really love it.
Really good album. What we thinking scores for Love, Death and Decay? I think I'd say this could be my favourite Stake album to date. It's a really, really interesting listen. There's so much going on, and I think that guitar tone just gets me every time. I'm just like, that shouldn't work. Like how does that work? Like, how is it so heavy yet so clean? It's bizarre. I think I probably score this. I mean, I like Caven. I thought Caven was a good 4 out of 5. I think this is better. I'd go 4.5 on this one. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Duncan, what are you thinking?
I love your logic. Caven for me was a 4.5. This is a 5.
Nice.
It is. That's the way I am just now. I think you're right. I think this album, very much like the Caven album, actually, is one that is not a chore to revisit. It's actually rewarding every time you revisit it, because there's just another bit where you'll be listening to it going, that's really smart. It's really clever how they did that. I love this. I think, oh man, get them over here. Get them over here, please, so we can go and see them. And this is another Hassle Records one.
Yep.
They are nailing it with Ithaca and with Blood Command at the moment and Stake. Give me that tour.
Oh,
I know I keep trying to get. That's a mixed tour that I would want to see.
Yep.
There they are.
They would work together though.
Yep, all together. Yeah, just get them all on stage. All jamming. Like just all on stage. Just get them all up there. Just like that's the new Slipknot. Right. Slipknot with more tits, and I mean physical tits and less people that act like tits. I'm looking at you, the clown from Slipknot. Shots fired at Slipknot for no reason at all. No reason. No, it's because I've got the cold. That's why I'm cantankerous and old. But yeah, there you go. 5. I loved it, and nice. please check it out.
Awesome. Kyle,
I'm going to join Duncan on this one with a 5.
Ooh.
Love this album.
Nice. So, Stake with our new album Love, Death and Decay, which is out on September 30th on Hassle Records. Links below at the band's Facebook, Bandcamp. Check it out, let us know what you think. Stick some comments in, happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye everyone.
Bye.